On today's Tech Help for Churches, 7 things to look for in the perfect free podcast host, and why you won't find those. Hi, and welcome again to Tech Help for Churches. This is the show where every week I help you with new media, social media, the internet for your church. My name is Paul Allen Clifford. So one thing I hear over and over and over again is from churches that say, man, we're in on podcasting or live streaming or whatever I'm talking about, but can we do that for free? And so I thought that I would create a list of what you should look for if you think that you found the perfect free live podcast host, which I don't think you'll find. But here is the list that I would look for, and if for some reason you find something that hits all these marks, then by all means, go with my blessing. But again, I don't think you're going to find it. So let's take a look at the list, and we'll just talk about why I don't think you're going to find it. So the first one is unlimited storage. From time to time, I will see a huge spike in the number of downloads that I have on one of my podcasts. And I'll think, oh great, I've finally crossed the line, I'm finally in the big time, there's all these new downloads, and then it just goes away back to about what it was before. Maybe I'll have 1 or 2 more on average, but in general, that's just it. You see, the reason that I see such a spike is when someone finds a new podcast that they love, a lot of times they'll just download every single episode that's available. Well, for my Thursday show, I started that in 2005. So I've got a lot of back episodes for people to download. So I'll have a lot of downloads on that one show when people find it. If someone finds one of my newer shows, I'll have not as many, but still I've got a pretty good history on all these shows. So I'll see a big spike in the numbers. By contrast, now imagine if I didn't have the unlimited storage. Someone finds my show, they get excited, they want to listen to every last episode they can, and they can download 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. Maybe you found a place that's particularly generous and lets you keep 10. Yeah, 10. You see, some people, they would be okay with 5 or 3, but there are other people. My wife, for example, she listens to podcasts, and when she finds a new one, she'll download every last one of them, and she thinks of it kind of like an audiobook. So in her mind, there's this huge thing to go through as quickly as she can to get caught up and be up to speed, and then she's disappointed when they only come in once a week. Because she'll listen to 7 or 8 a day. So 1 a week, that's nothing. And she's not atypical. There are a lot of people that are like that. So I want you to consider if you can get unlimited storage. By the way, there is one that's offering that, but we'll talk about that later. Next, no preroll, postural, or in-content ads. I'm not against ads. I just like to have control of that. So imagine this. Your church is talking about stewardship, about choosing to make countercultural decisions like drive older cars. None of my cars are less than 10 years old, for example. So you're talking about doing that, and right then, in cuts a car commercial for the brand new, whatever year this is, so I'm recording 2016, the brand new 2016 Lexus Infinity. Yeah, kind of opposite what you were just talking about. Kind of doing exactly the opposite. Now, it could be worse, it could be better, but you don't have control. So you don't want those ads unless you have control over them. And if you're okay with them, you're okay with them. I'm not against capitalism. I'm just against you trying to save money for your church and counteracting your message in the process. Next, your choice of license. Now, there is a hosting service that allows you to host podcasts for free. Now, it does other stuff. Not going to mention all the other stuff. But when I first started podcasting 10 years ago, they were around back then. So they've got some things going for them. But I chose not to go with them because they said I had to use a specific license. So what if you include something in your podcast that you have permission to distribute, but you don't have permission to include whatever license you want? Well, you're out of luck. You can't use that episode, or you've got to kind of lie to your podcast host. None of these are good options. So consider what's going on there, and you really want the ability to be in charge of the license that you use. Next, full podcast feature support. Now, a lot of people think, hey, it downloads, that's a podcast. Mostly true, but typically what you really want is a feature called byte-range requests support. So this is the ability for the podcatcher, the podcast player, to request only part of the podcast, a range, as opposed to the whole thing, because you'll get inflated numbers. You might think, wow, we're doing great, when in fact you have one person that like starts and stops and starts and stops and fast forwards, and this one person listens to part of it 10 or 12 times. But they only listen to the whole thing if you count all the pieces once. That's kind of misleading, and you want full support of that feature, because it is a feature that most podcast players do support, but the host has to support it as well. Feed portability. Your feed is the most important thing with a podcast. So if someone says, oh yeah, no problem, we'll do all these other things, but the thing is, it's our feed, you don't get it, if you want to move it, you're out of luck, run away. Run far, far away, because that is actually ownership of your show. Even if you get on and you say, hey everyone, unsubscribe here, subscribe over here, you're going to lose the vast majority of your audience. You just are. That's the way that it works. I'm sorry, I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. So I want you to have control over your feed. Look for a podcast host where you can say, hey, redirect over here, or give me my feed over there, or I don't want to use your feed at all, and no problem, because you give me a direct link. And that's actually kind of hard to come by in your paid podcast hosts. There are two that are really good about it, but then there are a lot that even you pay for and they're not good about it. So be careful on that one. Next, a proven business model. What I mean by this is free is nice, but who is actually paying? And will they pay enough to keep the podcast host around? One of the ones that I've mentioned already, I've already alluded to them, I haven't named them by name. They say, hey, here is our business model. We're going to put ads on the page to your podcast. We'll let you host for free. We'll give you unlimited episodes. We'll do all this great stuff. It's like you're paying, only you're not, because we're putting ads on your particular podcast page that's hosted with our service. that might be okay. But that's been tried over and over and over again. They're not the first person that came up with this idea as a business model. And to date, every single free podcast host that's tried to pay for the podcast hosting with banner ads has gone out of business. Every single one. I've done this for over 10 years, and I tried to get free hosting early on, and it did not work because there wasn't enough money in the banner ads to pay for the hosting. And that leads me to the last one, and that is a long track record. So if they have everything else listed, but they've been around for a week, I don't know. I don't know that I'd trust them. I don't know that I'd trust them if they've been around a month or even a year, because we keep hearing about .com companies, startups, that they do great at the beginning because their business model is basically raise a bunch of funding and hope you figure out how to make it back. And you can do that for a certain amount of time. But after 5, after 10 years, can you still do that? Or will those investors get antsy and say, we gave you money, why haven't you given it back to us? And they won't take, because we haven't figured this out yet? No, you need to figure it out if that's what you're doing. So there's one paid podcast host right now that claims that they're good, they're going to be around, and they've been around for a few years, but they keep losing money, and they fail one of these other tests. So it makes me wonder, are they really going to be around much longer, or are they not? And so that's what I ask you. So the reason I don't think you're going to find any of these is I think that they will limit your storage, and so you'll have to delete stuff that's more than a month or 2 old. I think that you'll find that they pay for it with ads in your content, either right before it, right after it, or right in the middle, and you don't have control of that. They'll make you choose a specific license, and you won't have control of that. They won't have full podcast feature support. They will want to hold on to your feed. They won't have a proven business model, or they won't be around for a very long time, either in the past or in the future. So that's why I recommend paying for podcast hosting. As it turns out, it's really not that expensive. If you skip a drink at Starbucks a couple of times, you can pay for podcast hosting. Depending on the drink you get, it might only be one Starbucks drink you need to skip a month to pay for podcast hosting. And in my mind, paying $5 a month and knowing, hey, this company that's been around for 10 years is going to still be around, that's worth something. And having a company that has all of these things and a proven track record, that's something. So those are the 7 things I'd look for, and that's why I don't think you'll find them. I hope this content's helpful to you, and if so, I bet you'd like my email newsletter, which I'm actually getting ready to write right now. So head on over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/newsletter, and there you can pick up a copy of my email newsletter, where I'll give you all sorts of tips and tricks, savings on upcoming tutorial classes that I have, and more about the great church tech content that you have grown to love. Until next time, this is Paul Allen Clifford with TrinityDigitalMedia.com. Go out and change eternity.